The movie starts out with a little girl named Wen, who has a hobby of catching grasshoppers to study them while giving them names. She is approached by a giant man resembling a famous wrestler, who then offers to help her catch more grasshoppers. However, he keeps looking over his shoulder as if expecting someone, and soon enough some suspicious-looking people start walking towards him, and the girl carrying deadly-looking weapons. Getting scared, the girl runs back to a wooden cottage where it is revealed that she is parented by two daddies. She manages to convince her daddies that there are dangerous people outside the cottage, but they don't believe her at first. However, they peek through their window and discover she was telling the truth.
This guy's freaking huge.
Leonard and his friends try to convince the daddies to open the door for them, as they have something important to say that involves saving a whole bunch of people, but the daddies notice the weapons in their hands and suspect the worst. Daddy Andrew tries 911, but there is no cell phone reception. Soon, the conversation turns into an altercation, and the four mysterious people force their way in. There is a brief fight, but it ends when Leonard picks up Wen, and it all becomes a hostage situation. The film suddenly flashes back when Daddy Eric's parents visited the couple after their union, but things end up awkward between them. Flash forward, the hostages are then tied up securely as the invaders proceed to explain that they are there to help the daddies save all of humanity. They then proceed to narrate how each of them represent a biblical plague, and that the daddies are meant to unalive one of themselves to save the world. But each time they refuse, one of the invaders must be sacrificed to prove to them that the plagues are real. Redmond is the most aggressive among them. But the daddies don't want to believe them and rebuke them repeatedly.
Even if I believe the world was at stake, which I don't.
It is Redmond's turn at first, and the daddies are asked again if they want to unalive one of themselves, but they refuse, and Redmond is then brutally sacrificed as a sign of the first plague to the utter horror of the family. At the time of sacrificing Redmond, though, Daddy Eric notices somebody in a mirror like a divine vision. The film flashes back again, and this time to show how the daddies became daddies. They are at a hospital wherein presumably they applied to adopt a baby. The baby turns out to be none other than Wen. This flashback is used to denote the growing love and bond of their new family. After offing Redmond, the remaining invaders react like normal human beings who have never done this before, giving us the impression that they are not a murderous gang for the first time. After this brutality, they cleaned up and switched on the TV, which miraculously seems to work where cell phone reception does not in the deep woods. They are all presented with a news report wherein a major earthquake had occurred 4 days ago, and the resultant tsunamis threaten many coastlines and thus a large number of human beings. Daddy Andrews still doesn't believe all this, but after some scenes of devastation are displayed, Daddy Eric seems to be affected. Leonard contends that this is the first plague that was released upon the sacrifice of the first of the horsemen. That's right. Now we can confirm that these 4 invaders are none other than the 4 biblical horsemen. In yet another flashback, it is shown how the family travels to this isolated cabin in the woods, singing along to songs, and there they discover a lake in which they all dive in without a care in the world. This scene is again meant to display the bond within the family, which is relevant for the conclusion of this film. Flash forward, Sabrina, who has been taking care of Daddy Eric's injured head from the fight earlier, narrates to him how she was a non-believer before all the biblical visions started occurring to her in a bid to convince him to do the unthinkable. Meanwhile, naughty Wen slips out of the hole made by Leonard earlier with the knowledge of Daddy Andrew, who reveals this to Daddy Eric when he is brought in by Nurse Sabrina. The plan was for Wen to escape the horror, but Leonard captures and brings her back, much to the frustration of Daddy Andrew. Then all of a sudden, Daddy Andrew goes into a traumatic state as he starts to remember being attacked in the past for being a quote-unquote happy person, and insists that the person who had called himself Redmond was the same.
Short while, but his name is O'Bannon. It's him.
At this point, Adrian starts suspecting her associates and talks about a message board where the four horsemen met. Both daddies now suspect the four horsemen brainwashed each other to believe fictional tales on the internet. Daddy Andrew has lost all his cool and rebukes the four horsemen repeatedly, even going to the extent to say that humanity does not deserve to be saved and defaming Leonard's character. However, Leonard, who is a teacher of orphan boys, corrects him by showing a nice photograph of himself and a bunch of young boys. If you have enjoyed this content so far, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. Leonard lets the two daddies face each other as they all retire for the night to face Judgment Day tomorrow, and Wen gets to sleep in her room. The next morning, Adrian, who happens to be a professional cook, treats Wen to a delicious breakfast while lovingly interacting with her, but naughty Wen steals a knife and slips it to Daddy Eric while nobody noticed. They squabble like the previous day, but soon enough it is time for another sacrifice. It's Adrian's turn now, and she starts out by revealing that she has a little son, which the daddies don't believe, but she throws in a child trivia to convince them.
He likes pancakes.
Even though she does not wish to die, she comes forward bravely remembering her son and what would happen to him if the world ends. Soon she too is unalived by the remaining two horsemen. Meanwhile, the daddies are doing their best to break free. After disposing Adrian's remains, they switch on the TV again to discover news of a new type of virus that is affecting children. This is the second plague brought on by Adrian's demise. Both daddies seem a bit influenced this time, and more so Daddy Eric. At this stage, Daddy Eric reveals to everyone about seeing a person in the mirror while Redmond was being sacrificed, and everyone is curious. However, Wen starts screaming for cartoon, and Leonard panics to switch the TV, but it all turns out to be distraction for the daddies to escape their ropes. A fight ensues, and Daddy Andrew uses this to limp out of the house to get the gun stashed in their car. However, Sabrina catches up and injures him, but he manages to get inside and arm himself while chasing her away. He goes inside to rescue Daddy Eric, who is struggling for his life, and scares Leonard enough to stop him. Suddenly, Sabrina runs in screaming like a crazy person, and he instinctively shoots and unalives her. In the midst of all this, the film cuts to yet another flashback to the day of the attack on Daddy Andrew, when he and Daddy Eric are at a bar and are suddenly attacked by a person for no other reason than the fact that they are a same-gender couple. This brings back memories of how Daddy Andrew recovered for weeks and then purchased a handgun for self-defense. This scene was to give a backstory of the handgun in their possession, and also continue the plot twist concerning Redmond being the attacker, because flash forward again, Daddy Andrew checks the body of the deceased Redmond and finds a driver's license that reveals he was actually O'Bannon, and contends that the family was targeted for the same reason that they are a same-gender couple and not because of an apocalypse. Meanwhile, Leonard, who has brutalized Sabrina's body already for the sake of sacrifice, is confronted by Andrew about Redmond, but Leonard says it does not matter now that Redmond is unalive and the plague has been released. Daddy Andrew locks Leonard in the bathroom, but soon there is a sound of breaking glass, and the daddies think Leonard has escaped, but he was only hiding behind a curtain and jumps on Andrew when he goes to check. After a struggle, Leonard now has the gun and forces the family to watch yet another news report displaying the third plague brought forth by Sabrina's sacrifice. This time, airplanes are crashing from the skies around the world. They are falling to the ground like flies. Damn. If this doesn't convince the daddies, then I don't know what will. Although all evidence proves Leonard's predictions and Daddy Eric and Wen are 99% convinced, Daddy Andrew still needs a minute. But Leonard, who has seen these visions, syncs with the words of the news presenter, speaking her words exactly before she has uttered them. Breaking down in tears, Daddy Andrew admits he believes now, but doesn't care if the world ends and his family are alone to walk the earth without anyone else. Frustrated, Leonard calls them outside so he can commit the final act. He, however, informs them that after he is unalive, they will have a few minutes to decide whom to sacrifice among them before the apocalypse happens. And after saying this, he switches himself off. There is no more time. As lightnings strike around them, the daddies argue amongst themselves as to who will be unalived. Daddy Andrew argues that as per the predictions, their family can still be alive even though alone on the planet, but Daddy Eric retorts, "What kind of a world would that be for Wen?" and wins the argument. Daddy Eric also says how each of the 4 horsemen represent a specific human quality and hence were chosen. He then says he saw a vision wherein Andrew and Wen have grown older and enjoy a good life without Eric being in it, and then makes the ultimate sacrifice. Devastated, Daddy Andrew and Wen walk out of the cabin as it is struck by lightning, burning all evidence. They drive to a cafe where people are discussing the apocalyptic events, which have now ceased following Daddy Eric's sacrifice, and Daddy and daughter discover everything happened in reality. The film closes with Daddy Andrew discovering the ID cards of the 4 horsemen and realizing they were all speaking the truth. Thank you for watching so far. Please consider subscribing and liking for more.